61 days. Let that sink into your bones for a minute. It has been over 2 agonizing months since an 84-year-old grandmother who relied on daily meds just to stay alive and barely had the strength to fetch her mail was literally swallowed up by the night in the Catalina foothills. We have 0 arrests, 0 official suspects, and absolutely no clear answers from the cops regarding the one burning question that has consumed everyone since morning. One who snatched her and where on earth is she hiding? From where we are sitting, this entire probe seems completely frozen in its tracks. Honestly, there were times when the media frenzy seemed to be grasping at straws, especially with that messy, impossible to read DNA evidence and a seriously blurry timeline. That chilling FBI footage of the masked creeper has been circulating for weeks without a single solid ID. The guy had literally torn the front doorbell camera straight out of its mounting brackets. The security floodlights were intentionally shattered. Plus, fresh blood was discovered, pooled right on her doorstep. Forensic teams later proved that blood belonged directly to Nancy. And here is the absolute kicker regarding the lead detective assigned to the most explosive missing persons mystery in modern American history. According to insider police sources talking to Banfield, the guy only had 2 measly years of experience working homicide cases. Just 2 years under his belt for a massive manhunt that drew in the FBI-dominated national news networks and had millions of terrified citizens watching every single update live. They finally yanked that rookie detective off the board when a special strike force took over around day 33. However, you just cannot undo the catastrophic damage of those first 33 days when a trail either gets boiling hot or goes completely cold. That crucial window vanished forever and everyone close to the investigation knew it was a disaster. But then Ashley Banfield dropped a massive bombshell on day 60 by bringing in a highly specific, active duty detective, not just some random TV talking head or retired profiler tossing out vague guesses. She brought on the exact guy who cracked a mystery eerily identical to this nightmare. We are talking about another woman living by herself, a highly targeted attack, bloody crime scenes, and absolutely 0 eyewitnesses to be found. It left the entire town paralyzed with fear, while the murderer hid right under their noses in the absolute last place cops checked the official logs of trusted professionals who had authorized completely legal access to her property. What this seasoned cop told Banfield will send absolute chills down your spine. He flat out suggested that law enforcement might have already casually chatted with the exact monster who kidnapped Nancy, literally sitting across a table from him without realizing it. The officers probably asked him direct questions, listened to his slick lies, and remain entirely clueless about his guilt. You absolutely need to stick around because by the time this video wraps up, you will finally understand why federal agents are aggressively investigating local builders, hired hands, and neighborhood subcontractors. They are heavily scrutinizing daily laborers in the Catalina foothills. Also, you will see how a solved homicide from Paso Robles, California, which was blown wide open by a piece of trash, a Coca-Cola bottle and tech that wasn't even around, 4 years ago could be the biggest breakthrough in all 61 days of this search. Let us pause and reset the board right here. If you have been following our coverage, you are already up to speed on the core details. However, we really have to lay the groundwork for that massive day 60 reveal, since context is the only way to grasp why this specific update changes everything. Let us talk about Nancy Guthrie. At 84 years old, the beloved mother of morning TV star Savannah Guthrie vanished from her upscale Tucson residence in the Catalina foothills on the dark evening of January 31st, 2026. Her relatives had safely brought her home right around 9:30 that night. You have to remember she had been suffering through some brutal physical agony in the weeks leading up to this nightmare. Savannah herself heartbreakingly admitted that even on a stellar day, her mom could barely manage the short stroll to grab her mail, let alone hike anywhere past it. The twisted kidnapper absolutely had to know about her frail condition beforehand. Either they meticulously factored her weakness into their sick plan, or it threw a massive wrench into their operation. Looking closely at how the crime scene was manipulated, the attacker obviously had to scramble and improvise when Nancy physically couldn't walk to the getaway spot. By the time Sunday rolled around, panic really set in when her tight-knit church community realized she had completely missed the morning service, which was totally out of character. Worried relatives rushed to check on her, but they didn't find a medical crisis. They walked straight into the terrifying aftermath of a highly calculated attack. The rear entryways weren't just casually left unbolted or cracked open by the wind. Someone had intentionally jammed those doors wide open. Digging into Banfield's exclusive reporting insiders revealed the scumbag actually used Nancy's personal garden flower pots as heavy wedges to secure his escape route. Every single access point was deliberately staged. The intruder completely destroyed the surveillance cameras, busted the floodlights, and left a horrific trail of blood that you could literally see from the road. That gruesome scene was caught on tape by Brian Enton from News Nation right by her front door. And tragically, forensics matched that exact blood spatter directly to Nancy. The feds eventually dropped that chilling Ring camera video of a masked man standing roughly 5'9" to 5'10" inches tall with a completely average physique. He was decked out in a thick ski mask, tactical gloves, a heavy coat, and lugged around a 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack. You could even spot the terrifying outline of a pistol holster strapped right onto his waist. The Bureau officially labeled this creep as a prime suspect, yet 61 days have passed and not a single soul has named him. Meanwhile, the forensic sweep inside the house pulled up a wildly chaotic DNA cocktail from several unknown people. Detectives quickly verified that this genetic material doesn't belong to Nancy or her relatives whatsoever. It is currently sitting in a high-tech lab getting aggressively sequenced. Sheriff Chris Nanos openly admitted that while forensic science is lightning fast these days, untangling such a messy genetic web can seriously drag on for weeks, months, or incredibly up to an entire year. He wasn't making pathetic excuses. That is just the harsh reality these detectives face daily. Desperate for answers, Savannah and her siblings slapped down a massive $1 million bounty for any clues to bring their mother home. When you stack that cash with the federal funding and the 88 Crimes Initiative, the entire pot swells to a staggering $1.2 million. Yet over 2 months in, nobody has stepped out of the shadows to grab that life-changing money. That silent stretch is huge, especially for a mystery smothered in nationwide headlines and a massive financial payout. 61 agonizing days without a single informant, eager to snatch up over $1 million, proves exactly how insanely tight-lipped and paranoid this suspect's inner circle truly is. Either the people holding the secrets are absolutely petrified to talk, or the evil mastermind behind this plot covered their tracks so perfectly that they are essentially a ghost. Pima County's own Sheriff Chris Nanos dropped a bombshell on NBC's Liz Kreutz on March 12th, flat out stating that his team finally understands the motive behind the madness. This wasn't a crime of opportunity, it was a lethal, calculated strike. The stalker knew Nancy's identity, stalked her exact address, and flawlessly bypassed her security without tripping any alarms that would have ruined the kidnapping. They mapped out every blind spot and weakness on that property. According to Banfield's leaks, the attacker scouted those flaws long before January 31st, revealing crucial pre-attack patterns that set the stage for Brian Enton's jaw-dropping Day 60 coverage. We have to unpack what this terrifying surveillance footage actually proves. This creeping behavior is exactly why hunting down local construction contractors isn't just a wild theory. It is the most logical path this manhunt could take. That shadowy ghost caught on the front porch camera definitely wasn't visiting the property for the very first time on January 31st. This isn't just some wild internet rumor. It is a cold, hard fact. This aligns perfectly with the Bureau's recent statements. Our suspect definitely visited the house previously, indicating that long before the kidnapping occurred. They lurked right around Nancy Guthrie's estate, completely unnoticed, or at least blended in so well that nobody batted an eye. Just ask yourself who actually pulls off that kind of invisibility. The Catalina foothills boast an incredibly tight-knit vibe, where locals spot weird cars instantly and random pedestrians draw serious suspicion. So who slips through these streets undetected? We keep arriving at one chilling conclusion. It was a guy whose job gave him total access. Picture a guy blending right in because he wears a utility belt, carries official paperwork, or drives a branded company truck. Locals saw him repeatedly and just dismissed him as everyday scenery. Now consider his exact moves on the evening of January 31st because he wasn't guessing. He marched straight toward the rear entrance. He already memorized the surveillance layout and took out the specific lenses watching him. Smashing the floodlights was easy since he mapped their exact locations beforehand. He even grabbed her personal planters right off the rear terrace. Wedging those entryways apart proved this guy orchestrated his path inside perfectly. He showed up fully geared with bags and a strapped gun. Nobody pulls this off on a whim. Slipping into a targeted residence, crippling the alarm systems, and moving blindly through pitch blackness requires intense reconnaissance. You cannot learn those details by cruising past once or browsing satellite imagery online. That takes hours of physical surveillance right outside her home. Lingering that long demands a solid alibi, a fake narrative, or a legitimate occupational excuse, which explains exactly why federal agents are currently grilling locals about any tradesman operating nearby. That logic drove the Bureau straight back to those streets, according to Brian Enton's broadcast. Let us unpack that News Nation dispatch as Banfield anchored her Day 60 broadcast heavily on those findings, which are utterly crucial for tracking the Bureau's next move. The feds flooded those foothills again. While they have patrolled the area heavily since early February, their interrogation tactics shifted dramatically this round, focusing on very precise details. Enton noted that locals confirmed the authorities circled back to press them on two highly specific topics. They wanted details regarding anyone who relocated right before the abduction occurred, alongside information on any active local building projects. Process that detail closely. They sought out folks who relocated right before she vanished alongside local renovation jobs. Enton shared a tip from a local woman claiming investigators directly ordered her friend to hand over an entire roster of builders and tradesmen renovating her house. They demanded the exact identities of every single tradesman involved with any structural upgrades happening across that subdivision. This bypassed routine canvassing completely. They launched a highly targeted hunt. Hand over those crew lists from the month preceding January 31st, predictably, when journalists later pressed for official statements. Federal spokespeople in Phoenix played it by the book, refusing to validate any rumors to protect their active Department of Justice probe. Staying silent at this crucial phase practically screams confirmation, especially for seasoned true crime followers who know exactly how to decode a classic Bureau non-answer. Retired Bureau veteran Steve Moore spoke out bluntly about the strategy. He insisted the task force is hardly spinning their wheels. They are aggressively advancing the timeline. Moore confidently argued from day one that Nancy Guthrie faced a highly calculated abduction orchestrated by someone intimately familiar with her exact address. He believes this sudden obsession with demanding tradesman rosters serves as a massive red flag. It proves the task force locked onto a very rigid suspect profile and is methodically eliminating those guys one by one. Everyone suspects a deliberate hit now. This definitely excludes a sloppy burglar stumbling blindly into an occupied living room. We are observing pure methodical precision here, not random chaos. Break down the actual logistics for a second. You simply cannot wander around the Catalina foothills undetected as a total outsider. The streets stay dead silent. It features the exact type of nosy suburban energy where a lingering sedan immediately triggers a police call. Yet a single demographic effortlessly navigates these upscale blocks like utter ghosts. Plumbers, roofers, independent builders, hired muscle lawn crews, wiring specialists, pool cleaners, or even courier drivers. Any professional clocking into a local shift carries an automatic hall pass. They can dump massive commercial vans curbside without raising a single suspicious eyebrow. Guys hauling heavy gear past locked fences get zero pushback. After grinding on a specific property for weeks, they basically turn into invisible fixtures that locals completely tune out. Loitering on long-term projects teaches them the exact floor plans, vulnerable access points, alarm panel locations, and the precise blind spots of every camera. Imagine if Nancy Guthrie's abductor actually held a legitimate, unquestioned daytime gig within her subdivision. Should that occupational camouflage explain his creepy surveillance, the Bureau's intense focus on the blue-collar crews isn't just a desperate final swing at a cold case. This theory easily forms the ultimate backbone of the manhunt. Fast forward to day 60, and Banfield hits the studio entirely fueled by fresh insider leaks regarding this tradesman probe. Honestly, her intel painted a pretty grim picture. An informant bluntly labeled the frantic search for every blue-collar guy near her street an absolute logistical nightmare. After chatting with contacts about hunting down all these independent builders for interrogations, they literally said, "It's a complete mess." Lock that specific phrasing into your brain immediately. It hardly sounds like whining, but rather a brutal reflection of field reality that veteran detectives facing labor-intensive files know all too well. Following the tradesman angle never yields just a single suspect. Detectives end up unraveling 50 different chaotic leads at the exact same time. A single suburban remodel easily hosts half a dozen separate crews tearing things up simultaneously. You get one foreman juggling roofers, drywall guys, painters, and pipe fitters. Worse still, every independent specialist drags along their own undocumented squad of laborers. Picture an invisible workforce roaming our towns, guys taking under-the-table jobs paid strictly in paper money off the books. These guys find gigs through word of mouth or shady corners, meaning you will never catch their names on corporate spreadsheets, stubs, or IRS forms. Yet they definitely exist as flesh and blood human beings who physically hauled materials around those exact blocks. Tracking down these shadows, confirming their identities, and proving their exact locations on random Tuesdays from half a year back, that creates an absolute nightmare. Plus, builders only make up one piece of the puzzle because we also have to consider yard maintenance teams circling through those streets weekly. Think about independent handymen fixing gates, checking pool chemistry, mounting roof panels, dropping off refrigerators, or scrubbing glass panes. Then consider local municipal employees carrying valid work orders that gave them full clearance to roam around. Furthermore, remember that empty house Antine highlighted during her broadcast, that residents emptied out right before Nancy vanished into thin air, leaving us wondering about its former occupants and past repairmen. Exactly who walked through those doors during the long weeks leading up to the 31st of January, we have to ask if detectives actually secured every single identity during their initial sweeps. Referring to those crucial preliminary chats conducted when the main cop barely had 2 years on the job and before any specialized unit even existed, calling it a complete disaster isn't being cynical at all. It provides a brutally realistic look at a procedural nightmare that veteran cops consider nearly impossible to decode, primarily because zero official directories exist here. Good luck finding some magical ledger detailing every laborer hired on a given block during a specific time frame. Police must rely entirely on flawed neighborhood gossip, scattered personal files, misplaced billing receipts that might be lost forever, unspoken alliances between independent tradesmen, and quick cash deals that completely bypass the banking system altogether. Federal agents currently find themselves smashing their heads against this exact administrative brick wall. However, this brings us to the crucial revelation that anchored Banfield's broadcast on day 60. Looking at the specific tragedy she kept comparing this to since day 37, we see how unraveling an equally tangled, hopeless web of random workers ultimately blew the whole mystery wide open. We are talking about Clint Cole and that second Nancy situation. Here, Banfield pulled a brilliant media move that mainstream networks completely missed because for her Day 60 special, she refused to book some generic federal expert who merely studied comparable files. Viewers didn't get stuck listening to another former behavioral specialist rambling vaguely about how blue-collar suspect tracking usually operates. Instead, she interviewed the exact investigator who successfully cracked the very same parallel mystery she had been referencing right from the start. Meet Clint Cole, a veteran investigator who retired from the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Department after dedicating 32 years to the badge-spinning 10 of those hunting killers. When local authorities finally launched their Unsolved Crimes Unit, he was tapped as their premier agent, serving as its pioneer. People across the country recognize him for finally putting the Kristen Smart tragedy to rest, effectively shattering a 26-year mystery through his relentless digging. Furthermore, this man single-handedly dismantled the horrific homicide surrounding Nancy Woodrum. Allow me to break down the Woodrum timeline with the extreme precision it absolutely warrants. I'm not doing this just to repeat old content, but rather because the precise, methodical way cops unraveled this mystery, clue by bloody clue, mirrors the current federal operation in Tucson closer than any recent modern investigation. At the time, Nancy Woodrum had just turned 62. She ran a beauty shop down in Paso Robles, a tight-knit coastal California wine hub housing roughly 35,000 residents, where everyone recognized their neighbors. As a deeply committed Jehovah's Witness, her loved ones universally praised her incredibly kind, giving, and purely sweet nature. Life threw unimaginable heartbreak her way, including the infant death of her boy and the later loss of her adolescent girl, yet she persevered and crafted a beautiful existence. Following the passing of her husband Robert, she resided solo inside a beloved Victorian farmhouse, dubbed Paradise Ranch, located along Geneseo Road near Creston. Between managing her business and participating in local events, absolutely nobody harbored any ill will toward this woman. Alarm bells rang on the 5th of May, 2018, when she skipped her scripture class, an incredibly out-of-character move. Her daughter, Amanda Peel, heard the news and quickly dispatched a local friend to investigate, only to discover the front entrance of the property swinging freely in the wind. A TV blared in the background amidst a totally wrecked living space, with crimson stains painting the floors and a glaring red palm print smeared across a bed cover. Someone had stripped the mattress bare, yet left all her valuables completely untouched in their usual spots. With her vehicle parked outside and her mobile device resting inside, she had seemingly evaporated, prompting authorities to kick off a massive search effort. Detectives grinded tirelessly for several seasons, interrogating literally anyone whose orbit crossed with the victim. They grilled relatives, close pals, beauty parlor, clients, and even tourists who rented rooms at her estate right before she vanished into thin air. Since she frequently hosted large gatherings, cops scrutinized guests from a recent marriage ceremony on site, and they even investigated a property broker who once tried selling the acreage. Attention quickly shifted toward a local tradesman hired for renovations, especially since paper trails proved he bitterly fought with her about outstanding invoices, creating massive financial friction that seasoned cops always recognize as a huge red flag. Yet every single one of those promising paths led straight to dead ends. While that disgruntled builder seemed like the absolute perfect suspect, for a while intensive digging ultimately cleared his name entirely. Detectives methodically exhausted her entire address book, crossing off names or demoting suspects until the investigation slowly ground to an agonizing halt. 7 long months ticked away, leaving the file open but completely frozen, stalling any hopes for closure until cops unleashed a brand new digital perimeter tactic back in 2018. While the tech wasn't exactly standard police protocol yet, the strategy involved grabbing a judge's signature, sketching a digital circle over a map, and forcing tech giants to hand over data on every single smartphone, pinging inside that exact zone during the crime's timeframe. Because these apps silently track your movements all day long, that historical footprint remains forever, allowing armed detectives to snatch it right up. Back in 2018, a completely frozen homicide investigation pushed San Luis Obispo deputies to deploy this exact game-changing tactic. Investigators established a digital perimeter enclosing Paradise Ranch, pinpointing the specific hours during which Nancy Woodrum vanished before filing their legal requests and anticipating the incoming data. Once those records returned, the digital footprint isolated a singular cellular device, pinging at the scene during those crucial hours lacking any justifiable reason for its presence. Authorities traced this mobile to Carlo Alberto Fuentes Flores, an independent contractor who painted houses and spent several weeks remodeling the Paradise Ranch estate right before Nancy vanished. He was explicitly brought on board to stain the deck of Nancy Woodrum, granting him an unquestionable daily pass to roam around her private residence for quite some time. This employment provided him ample opportunity to memorize the floor plan study, her daily habits, figure out her lifestyle, and pinpoint the exact moment she sat utterly isolated. Literally speaking, the man possessed a completely flawless excuse for hovering nearby, and this seemingly innocent everyday work connection effectively shielded him from drawing any major police suspicion during those crucial initial phases of the ongoing manhunt. Undercover cops immediately started tailing Fuentes Flores following that digital breakthrough. Agents observed his diner visit, waiting until he tossed his empty cola container into the garbage outside before swooping in to snatch the item, swabbing genetic material directly off the rim, while the suspect remained completely oblivious to the fact that his discarded trash just solved the entire mystery. Those genetic markers aligned perfectly with forensic clues pulled from Nancy Woodrum's sleeping quarters following her abduction, prompting Clint Cole to haul Fuentes Flores straight into an interrogation room. What Cole dropped on him across that interrogation table remains an absolute masterclass in psychological pressure and stands as an unforgettable piece of brilliant police strategy. Carlo, we brought you inside because of facts, not theories, and we are certainly not bluffing. This undeniable truth from an officer holding all the cards finally caused Fuentes Flores to crack. Following his ultimate admission of guilt, he guided local authorities toward the Carrizo Plain, a deeply desolate agricultural patch near Route 58, roughly 60 minutes past Paso Robles, finally exposing Nancy Woodrum's hidden corpse after 7 agonizingly long months. A jury found him guilty of capital murder alongside sexual assault, resulting in a permanent, lifelong stint behind bars starting in February 2022. State appellate judges swiftly rejected his post-conviction challenge by 2023, leaving Cole to deeply contemplate the ordeal, sharing thoughts openly regarding a highly specific instance from the initial hunt that truly haunts the mind. Long before their digital tracking success, the investigator actually dialed up Fuentes Flores for a chat. This was purely a casual ring, simply inquiring about another independent builder working the same site. The painter picked up and acted incredibly helpful. Hearing absolutely nothing suspicious, the detective simply pivoted away until several months later. Following the capture, the admission, and the guilty verdict, Cole re-examined that brief audio exchange and realized a harsh truth: you must always interrogate suspects face to face. With the benefit of hindsight, the investigator feels certain the killer would have utterly failed to mask his immense guilt if they had occupied the same physical space, allowing the officer to study his physical reactions instead of merely trusting a disembodied voice through a receiver. Law enforcement had already engaged the perpetrator, directly pulling him straight into their investigative crosshairs. Yet the frustrating gap bridging that initial contact and their massive revelation spanned 7 exhausting months. 100% the guy would have cracked under pressure that July if we interacted personally, linking heavily into Savannah's recent comments and established expert knowledge. We genuinely need to analyze Savannah Guthrie stepping back onto the Today Show. Set this past April 6th, exactly 8 weeks following her mom's shocking vanishing act. She claimed returning felt absolutely mandatory for her soul's mission, acknowledging she was permanently altered by this horrific tragedy, frantically trying to reignite the tiny sparks of optimism regarding her mother's survival, even as she bravely accepted the grim reality that she might already be deceased. Watching this household suffer so openly has captivated the entire country, reaching a level of widespread notoriety that Vanishes rarely ever managed to accomplish. Sure, her celebrity status injects massive mainstream spotlight and enduring journalistic coverage into a mystery that typically fades fast, but criminal probes simply cannot operate on fame alone. Progress demands sprawling spreadsheets, grueling legwork, and the brutally tedious task of hunting down any hired hand or daily wage earner occupying that suburban community over an extended time frame. During her broadcast, the anchor expressed terror that her personal stardom potentially placed a massive bullseye on her mom, which remains an incredibly heavy burden to carry. Assuming this abduction was meticulously calculated, a theory authorities strongly support as absolute fact, the perpetrator desperately needed deep intel regarding the victim's identity, her exact residential address, and residential vulnerabilities. Honestly, those specific details could easily leak from dozens of random avenues. Yet understanding the literal mechanics of breaching the estate, possessing the tactical awareness to navigate pitch-black hallways and deactivating alarms in the absolute perfect order, alongside pulling off the strike flawlessly enough to avoid waking neighbors while dropping minimal forensic clues, screams intimate familiarity. It requires hours lingering nearby, leveraging the exact type of unnoticed blue-collar disguise that a hired handyman repair guy or anyone wielding a solid excuse for loitering nearby would effortlessly gather over time. You really must pay close attention to Steve Moore's analysis regarding the federal probe into local builders, as it feels crucial. He insists agents are advancing the hunt rather than retreating. Through his veteran lens, whenever the Federal Bureau starts demanding the exact identities of various laborers occupying a designated zone throughout incredibly tight timeframes, they clearly possess a fully developed psychological sketch ready for active comparison. Authorities refuse to just cast random nets into the dark. They hold a distinct silhouette in mind, filtering every newly discovered identity through that mold until an exact match drops. The second they lock onto it, when a singular suspect mirrors their behavioral model flawlessly, compared to the rest, they move straight into direct physical confrontations. This echoes the precise maneuver Clint Cole deeply regrets delaying for 6 long months down in Paso Robles, making these chilling similarities absolutely undeniable. Frame this entire scenario around the massive federal operation currently tearing through the Catalina foothills, where agents furiously hunt for local construction crews right now. Freelance specialists and daily wage earners boasting solid occupational alibis for wandering around Nancy Guthrie's subdivision leading up to January 31st, folks who blended in seamlessly. Their presence never sparked any panic among the homeowners. These same guys probably face minor interrogations during the initial chaotic hours by a junior investigator, holding barely 2 years on the job before falling completely off the radar once the massive task force assembled. Meanwhile, Clint Cole, the exact investigator who discovered firsthand how his ultimate target slipped through initial interviews long before the Woodrum mystery finally unraveled, joined Banfield roughly 60 days later, eager to break down his painful lessons and connect those dots directly to this modern tragedy. Show notes clearly map out his primary talking points without hesitation. Producers specifically booked him to justify how law enforcement likely interviewed the true culprit, already proving this is absolutely no marketing gimmick. We are watching the exact playbook unfold right now on the streets of Tucson. Let me break down exactly why this chilling theory holds water. Consider the sheer calculated madness behind grabbing her like that. Those security lenses didn't just break by some freak accident. A masterstroke of sabotage wiped out only the crucial viewpoints, mapping those essential getaway routes. Every single bulb got blacked out with military precision. Propping those entryways wide open demanded intimate familiarity with the home. Is exactly blueprint such as blueprint. That shadowed intruder already knew every inch of her yard. Nobody simply wakes up on January 31st and wings a flawlessly executed kidnapping. Our suspect spent weeks, maybe months, meticulously plotting while hiding out in plain sight. We are talking about a hired handyman or casual tradesman spending countless hours quietly watching the estate under the guise of honest labor. The perfect alibi handed them the ultimate advantage. Armed with absolute freedom to roam unbothered, they weaponized their daily routine to silently gather crucial intel for a flawless strike. Picture them casually chatting with cops during those frantic initial hours right after the crime, back before federal agents unleashed their massive manhunt upon the community. The culprit probably spun a few quick lies to some rookie cop and breezed right out the station doors, completely unaware they nearly blew their cover. Cole preaches staring these monsters right in the eyes, since liars inevitably crack under direct pressure. Understand that this undeniable truth isn't just some abstract theory meant for idle daydreaming. We are looking at a hardline tactical shift that explains booking him exactly 60 days in, while federal agents aggressively canvass the foothills demanding fresh suspects from locals. Banfield holds a terrifying ace up her sleeve. Hitting day 60 transformed her ordinary crime broadcast into something utterly explosive once she signed off by dropping a massive breadcrumb. Viewers learned she possesses tightly guarded intel regarding a massive forensic breakthrough. She also boldly claimed to know precisely which suspect federal interrogators are currently grilling, moving past vague profiles. Beyond just guessing about random local handymen, she pinpointed an exact individual tied directly to that crucial puzzle piece the entire true crime community has been desperately begging for. Her insider allegedly spilled the shocking truth behind that critical clue. Pay attention now, because separating gossip from verified facts strictly guides our operations around here. Our broadcast merely amplifies the bombshell she dropped on television. Our team lacks any independent confirmation regarding those heavily guarded secrets. Guessing games regarding the target's identity have no place here. Naming uncharged individuals violates our strict policies, just like disguising wild theories as unshakable truths. Those ethical boundaries remain absolutely ironclad. However, whenever a veteran journalist wielding such an impeccable track record drops a hint, like that paying fierce attention becomes completely mandatory. For weeks, her relentless daily coverage has utterly dominated the airwaves. Her groundbreaking scoops continually steer the narrative from exposing the rearranged planners to leaking the gruesome, bloody discoveries indoors. Uncovering the 2-year novice initially running the manhunt, exposing the 33-day delay in forming a strike team and revealing why feds circled back to interrogate local tradesmen. Rival networks quickly verified her massive exclusives, while the rest of her claims stand completely unchallenged by authorities. Nobody bats 1,000 with anonymous tips. Certain controversial broadcasts definitely sparked fierce backlash and courtroom warnings, yet she consistently crushes the competition when dropping ironclad forensic breakthroughs. A heavy-hitting anchor navigating such an explosive manhunt doesn't bluff about unmasking the primary interrogation target. That tease wasn't some cheap cliffhanger designed to boost ratings for Wednesday's show. We are watching a seasoned pro carefully throttle highly classified leaks, fully knowing that spilling secrets too early could permanently shatter the entire prosecution. Her grueling 60-day marathon of relentless coverage culminated perfectly with Cole's chilling handyman theory. She painstakingly laid down the essential groundwork, ensuring her upcoming bombshell detonates with absolutely devastating impact. Forget about random monikers plucked from obscurity. This impending reveal spotlights a specific professional demographic that federal agents are currently tearing apart. Remember, targeting this exact labor demographic previously netted a murderer who outsmarted early police interviews. It ultimately took 7 agonizing months before that identical phantom finally surrendered a hidden corpse. Every single puzzle piece she arranged leads straight down a solitary, terrifying path. Bringing a legendary detective onto her 60th broadcast was a brilliant, highly calculated maneuver, not random luck. The veteran cop literally lived through the nightmare of realizing the ultimate villain had confidently breezed through a standard police interview long before the squad realized their massive blunder. Let this burning thought echo tonight as we face reality. 61 agonizing sunrises have passed without handcuffs or any official target. Spectators merely see a paralyzed bureaucracy spinning its wheels. It feels like an endless circus producing sensational headlines instead of actual justice. Federal agents aren't desperately clawing at shadows when they subpoena the payroll records of every single blue-collar worker who stepped foot nearby over several months. Such a fiercely calculated dragnet requires massive manpower for a reason. These seasoned profilers locked onto a distinct behavioral type and are ruthlessly pulling the net tight around their prey. They deployed this identical playbook back in 2018. Digital geofencing effortlessly unmasked a rogue cell signal lurking exactly where it never belonged. Now they are grinding, manually dissecting every single payroll sheet, cornering every laborer, and tearing apart every alibi. The hero cop who cracked the mystery dropped by the studio on day 60. He vividly illustrated how the mastermind usually sits calmly in the precinct lobby long before detectives connect the dots. Lock them in a tiny interrogation box. Telephone chats completely blind you to those subtle nervous twitches, delayed breaths, and dead-eyed stares that only close combat reveals. So let this terrifying thought consume you right now, because the entire manhunt hinges on it. Did federal agents already shake hands with the monster who snatched her? Have they even realized their fatal oversight? Wait until she finally detonates the identity of the suspect, currently sweating under the federal spotlight. Once she unleashes those heavily guarded secrets onto the public, will we recognize the culprit? Are we talking about some phantom who briefly skimmed the perimeter of our radar weeks ago? A ghost who calmly navigated a preliminary interrogation with a bulletproof alibi covering their tracks perfectly, then casually strolled out the front doors without setting off a single blaring alarm bell. History proves it happens. The man who killed her was merely hired to stain her patio. He left a solid paper trail. The predator possessed an unassailable excuse to linger around her house. 7 agonizing months dragged by before relentless tech surveillance finally unmasked the killer hiding under their noses. The detective lived that exact nightmare. That explains exactly why he took the hot seat on day 60. Mark my words, the minute this scandal blows wide open, nobody will be shocked by the hired hand connection. We return the second Banfield reveals the explosive secrets she holds. Once those bombshells drop, our entire understanding of this mystery completely flips. Remember, we created this broadcast strictly to share knowledge and educate our viewers. Every single person discussed regarding this ongoing probe maintains absolute innocence until a judge and jury officially convict them during a formal trial. We refuse to name potential perpetrators and strictly avoid treating unverified theories as absolute truth. Throughout our coverage, we consistently separate concrete evidence rumors tied to one individual and our own logical conclusions. Got Nancy Guthrie clues? Alert the FBI at 1-800-CALL FBI Ring 88 crime or visit tips.fbi.gov. Let us begin. This heartbreaking story reminds us of a truth society can never afford to forget. The elderly are not invisible, and their safety is a measure of our humanity. An older person may walk more slowly, speak more softly, or depend on others for daily care, but their life carries just as much worth, dignity, and sacred value as anyone else's. When a vulnerable person is harmed, it is not only a family tragedy, it is a moral test for the entire community. The deeper lesson is that evil often succeeds where people stop paying attention. That is why communities must choose vigilance over indifference, compassion over distance, and courage over silence. Neighbors should notice. Authorities should act with urgency and competence. Families should never feel ashamed to speak loudly for those who cannot defend themselves. This story also teaches us that truth may be delayed, but it must never be abandoned. Justice begins when ordinary people refuse to look away. A safe society is built not only by laws, but by conscience, by people who protect the weak, honor the elderly, and understand that every human life deserves to be searched for, fought for, and remembered.